Blog Talk Radio.
You are now listening to True Murder, the most shocking killers in true crime history, and the authors that have written about them. Gacy, Bundy, Dahmer, The Night Stalker, BTK. Every week, another fascinating author talking about the most shocking and infamous killers in true crime history. True Murder, with your host, journalist and author, Dan Zupansky.
Good evening. This is your host, Dan Zupansky, for the program True Murder, the most shocking killers in true crime history, and the authors that have written about them. Sarah Pender was an attractive, outgoing honor student with great potential, but the straight and narrow held no appeal for this depraved young woman who knew how to get what she wanted from men, even if it meant murder. After enlisting an ex-high school football hero to help her kill two of her roommates, Sarah was dubbed the female Charles Manson and given a 110-year prison sentence. With the assistance of a prison guard, she broke out of jail, eluding authorities for months and becoming the most wanted woman in America. But was she dangerous because she had killed, or because of her incredible talent for manipulating men? As a fugitive, she seduced a wealthy entrepreneur into giving her a cushiony lifestyle in exchange for sex. But like the others who tangled with Sarah before, he would soon learn he wasn't just an accomplice, but another one of her victims. My special guest this evening is Steve Miller, and he's the author of Girl Wanted, The Chase for Sarah Pender. Welcome to the program, and thank you to agreeing to this interview, Steve Miller.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Thank you very much. First off, let us, our audience, know how you came to be able to write this book, what motivated you to want to cover this story, and how you were in a position to be able to do that.
Well, the case of Sarah Pender, the escape, came to my attention several months after she broke out. She broke out in August of 2008, and I think it was around the beginning of December that I was casting about. I had finished doing everything I could for my first book, my first true crime book, A Slaying in the Suburbs, and so I was looking for what was next, and I came across Sarah Pender somehow. And what struck me immediately was, here's a woman who's still out. I mean, she escaped in August, and she's still out, and I thought, this is a long time to be out. So I went down to Indianapolis. I live in Lansing, out in Michigan. I drove down to Indianapolis, and I started making some contacts down there to find out, who is this Sarah Pender? How come she's out? Who's helping her? And I came in touch with a number of people, including some people who were looking for her, the U.S. Marshals, et cetera, et cetera. And so I thought, well, this might be a good magazine story. And so I pitched it to people. People said, let's wait and see if she's still out after Christmas, and maybe we want to go ahead with this, the most wanted woman in America. Subsequently, she was caught December 21st. So there goes my magazine story. And I thought, well, there goes the story. Okay, that's good enough. And about a month later, though, I got one of the sources I made got back in touch with me, and he said, you aren't going to believe this, but we found out everything, where she was, and it's an amazing story. And it's we taped the interviews with her and some of her accomplices, and this is pretty interesting. And bingo, right then I knew. I said, if these tapes are real, I've got a book. Where do you go when you escape from prison? 136 days, you just disappear, and she did. She was gone, off the map.
Right. Now let's take us back more so to the beginning anyway, before we even get to the crime itself. And like I say, I got to applaud you for having surprised a guy like me who's been reading true crime for quite a while, and so I applaud you for that. Tell us about Sarah Pender. Tell us about her father, Roland, her biological mother, Bonnie, and to a lesser degree, I guess, her stepmom, Cheryl. But tell us about the life of Sarah Pender growing up.
Well, Sarah was a product of a broken home, and she was she's an incredibly smart girl. Just all the way growing up, she seemed well adjusted, et cetera, and so she had a decent upbringing. She her mother, her birth mother, left the home, and her father subsequently remarried. She was brought up in she wasn't poor really, and she, as I wrote this book, I talked to people who said, she was really genuinely a kind person, a decent person, and and she liked music and she was just like any other kid. And her father, Roland, was seemed like a decent guy. He's brought up in a fairly normal household and so on. He's a smart guy. As someone told me, they said Sarah got her smarts, her intelligence from her father, who was a very he was an entrepreneur, very, very good a good businessman, et cetera, et cetera. And so Sarah essentially got through high school pretty well, and she was a pre-physics major at Purdue, in fact, for 1 year. Right. And so she had a decent upbringing. I don't know where it went south, but something happened. I mean, now she also, when I say this now all the time, I say she had her problems. She had some juvenile delinquency. She stole a car at one point from her mom or stepmom and crashed it and so on and so forth. But there was nothing to say. This is going to be someone who's going to do a double homicide.
Right. Now, to paint the picture here so that we really fully understand Sarah Pender and her allure, and when we talked about, we just alluded to the manipulation, that she was a manipulator of men. But tell us, at say 18 or 19 years old, what did she look like? She wasn't, say, a classic beauty, but give us her what she actually looked like, what her physical features were, so that we can understand this manipulation a little bit later on in the book.
Well, she struggled with weight issues her entire life, and some said that she was bulimic. In the book we talk about that. I went fairly in depth about her, about her childhood, about how she came up. But she was at times obese. And so on and so forth. So but what she did was she would compensate for that by developing her intellect rather deeply, and also realizing that she couldn't get what she wanted with looks. She started realizing that with her intelligence, she could talk people into doing things. She figured out how to coerce, and this kind of thing. And so, if one thing isn't going to work, it was almost a coping skill that she developed somehow as she got older, and then it served her very well later on in life in a criminal way.
Now, you say there wasn't any real major problems and run-ins with the law in her teenage life. Part of this story has some drug involvement, serious drug involvement. When does she dabble in drugs, and what kind of drugs are we talking about, and what age, approximately?
She smoked marijuana, as a kid, as a teenager, and so forth. And then she began dabbling in acid and psychedelics, things like that. And so yeah, she was. I mean, it's hard to say. There were some would say, well, there were words. There was word going around that she was getting into drugs and so on and so forth. But it's hard to. I could never nail down that she was some sort of hardcore drug user in high school as a kid. Now, when she went to Purdue, however, that's when she kind of really got into the partying life. She didn't, she was away from home, and she had that freedom, and she really, really got into it there. She told me herself, in fact.
And as a result of doing this drugs and partying and not really taking school as seriously as maybe she could have and she should have, what happened in that year?
Well, she after her first year of college, she got out. She got out and just decided she wasn't going to, she wasn't going to go back, and she really got, she got a job, and she began really, really hitting the party scene real hard. Cocaine cocaine. She was doing a lot of cocaine. Spending essentially her her whole weekends were party time.
Now, tell us about Rick Hull, and tell us a little bit about his background and his upbringing, and who he had become, and what his high school life was really like and characterized by.
Well, Rick Hull was he was raised by his mother and his grandmother in a small town outside of Indianapolis, north of Indianapolis, called Noblesville, and his father had split on him and so on, and so he was really to replace that loss of the father. He got really into sports, and he was real good. He was a really good football player, and he played everything, but he was quite the he's just quite the athlete. He was recruited. He was flown out to Syracuse to meet with recruiters, and they put him there. He was courted by Indiana University, DuPage, Joliet Junior College. So he was he was on his way, but he also liked to drink, and he got a DUI, and that was that. There goes his scholarships. And
wow.
and that was it. He was sunk. But in high school, he was a star football player. He's a big guy. And Sarah met him at a Fish concert outside Indianapolis, as a matter of fact. And that was they got along famously. It was July of 2000, and they got along right away and became boyfriend girlfriend almost immediately.
Now, how long was it before they cohabitated together, and did they live with anyone immediately when they did decide to live together? What was the circumstances in their relationship, and when did they decide to move in together?
Well, actually, Sarah was living on her own, and Rick was living up. Rick Hall was living up in Noblesville, and so very, very quickly, within a month, it was August, end of August, 2000. They moved into a little house just off downtown Indianapolis, and they took on as roommates a friend of Rick's named Andrew Cataldi and his girlfriend. Both of them were runaways from the Nevada Department of Corrections. They were locked up on drug charges, but they had a police kind of thing where they could go out and work during the day and have to come back in and check in at night. They just ran. They split, and that was that. So. And you had these four people living in this little house, really small house, a little 2-bedroom. And what they did was they thought, let's build a meth lab. So essentially, they were cooking meth in there, and they were dealing drugs. And this fellow, the fellow from Nevada, Andrew, was quite the dealer of hallucinogenics and pot and speed. So they had a drug house. Sarah, meantime, was the only one in the house that worked. She had a regular job at a construction firm, and that was that. And so there they go. That was their life. They were ready to go. And they were going to make a lot of money, and they were sure they were going to make a lot of money.
So Andrew and Rick were former friends, and so they basically struck this deal, which included the two women as well, that they, through the connections, were going to make some money. They were all going to knuckle down. Sarah was going to work and sort of provide whatever legitimate cover, because none of them really had any background that they really wanted to put forward, even Rick. And so they proceeded like that. And you said they moved in together around August 2000. How many months before some real negative events happened, to say the least?
It didn't take long. In October, at the end of October, things had started to go south. There was, obviously you got four people, everybody's on drugs, and things just aren't going to turn out well. Almost no matter what happens there. And these are really hard drugs. This is like meth, and people are staying up for days on end. And
right.
There are drug debts and so on, and now there are control issues. Who's making more money and who's working harder, and to be fair, in the book I detail, Sarah was going to work every day. But by the end of October, the tensions had really come to an end. And Sarah and Rick went to a Walmart, and on October 24th, and they picked up a shotgun.
And what was the reason? What was the reason why they were going to buy a shotgun at that time?
Well, at the time, there were all kinds of, and it depends on who you ask. Sarah said, it's going to be, it was going to be a birthday gift for Rick. And, he was going to go hunting with it and so on and so forth. But, really, at the end of the day, the reason somebody had made a decision here that they're going to off these guys, that Andrew and his girlfriend have got to go. Now, in the book, we cover quite a bit of, what really, who did what, who did the shooting. But inevitably, somebody got shot, and it was Andrew and his girlfriend, and Sarah and Rick drew big time for it because they were convicted of murder.
Now the bodies were they were shot, both of them, with this shotgun, close range. Now the confusion that you skillfully put in this book, so that we really don't know even till the end, we're still believing that maybe Rick did this, because there was controversy on that somebody had left the home, and we believe that Sarah had left the home, and when she came back, the roommates were dead, and she asked for an explanation. Now, why she's as guilty as Rick is, regardless, is because she helped dispose of those bodies. Now, what did they do after they murdered, or someone murdered these two people? What did they both together do?
After Andrew and his girlfriend were murdered, the bodies were rolled up into blankets and a carpet, and they were taken about 5 blocks away and dumped in a dumpster. Put in a dumpster, and it wasn't going to take much time for. It's not going to take much time for somebody to discover a body in a dumpster. And so, but the thing was, Sarah helped, they rolled up the bodies and put them in the dumpster. And Sarah went to work the next morning. I mean, this thing happened about 2 a.m. By 8:09 a.m. on Wednesday, in the book, in fact, I got her time card. And we talk about this. She punched in at 8:09 on Wednesday, and she left for lunch at 12:09 and returned at 1:11 and left for the day at 5:04. And they said that she had a new outfit on and she was in the best mood I had seen her in for some time, or one of her coworkers said.
Right.
So I mean, and meanwhile things are going down. The bodies are being found. They're so initially unidentified, and they show the tattoo of Andrew on the television set, a Grateful Dead tattoo on his left thigh. And once they show those, on TV, even their friends saw him and said, "Holy, this was this Andrew Cataldi guy," and so immediately Rick and Sarah took off. And where did they take off to? Oh, not very far north, just up to Rick's home in Noblesville, a few miles north of town. And they didn't really run that far. They didn't get that far.
So they were apprehended in short order, and then what happened?
Well, they all started. They both got charged, and initially, well, here's what happened. They both get stuck in the county jail, and they're charged with murder, and they're waiting up for trial, and it takes a little bit of time. And Sarah, her father, who is kind of a man of means, he goes out and gets a really good attorney for Sarah. And over the next few months, this guy is working a deal. If she'll flip on because the police, everybody's buying her version of the events, that she went out for a pack of smokes, came back, and everybody's dead. And so what happens is, though, that Sarah can't help herself, and she starts writing letters from jail to her friends, and talking about how stupid the prosecutors are, and how she's going to beat this case, and how stupid her lawyer is, and so on. And obviously the corrections people find out, and they get the letters, and they show them to everybody, the prosecution, show them to the defense attorney, and next thing you know, the deal's off the table. It looks like the prosecution isn't so stupid as Sarah asserts, and you're going to go to trial for murder. And she ended up going to trial for murder, and the jury found her guilty, 110 years. Rick subsequently pled, and he got 90.
Now let's go back just a little bit. You talked about Sarah when she's questioned. Of course, she sticks to the story that she just aided and abetted him after the fact.
Yes.
She went out for, and what did she say that Rick's motivation was to kill the roommates? What did she give the police as the motive?
Well, she said that there was over money.
Was it something to do with Tabitha? Rick Hall's sister had owed some money.
It owed like $150 or something like that. A really, really, really low amount. And so she said, it was a squabble over money, is what Sarah said. And it probably, no matter what, it probably was, So, but at any rate, he, they both were really, really in trouble no matter what, and so they were, in the book we detail some of the goings on as this all transpires. Her letters, I obtained all these letters, so I quote fairly liberally from these letters that she wrote to people and so on. And it's kind of interesting to read these.
To be fair, with these letters, though, are more than just taunting the police and saying, listen, they're a bunch of dummies and I'm going to beat this. She's also, why they decide to prosecute her is because she's incriminated herself, essentially, in these letters as well, hasn't she?
Well, there's one letter that they obtain. She says, I don't know what happened that night. It must have been the acid. I just flipped, or something like that. Well, that letter was in massive dispute, but it was enough to make her look guilty, essentially incriminating herself. She contends that letter was not written by her. She contends that Rick Hall had someone in prison, in jail, write that letter and make it appear that it came from her. That the letter was, I wish I could go back and change the events of that night. Andrew Cataldi, was so mean that night I just snapped. I didn't mean to kill them. It must have been the acid. Okay. Well, the letter was analyzed by the prosecution and by a state forensics handwriting analyst, and guess what? Sarah was the author of that letter. Well, one problem in that case was that letter was never checked in terms of with a handwriting expert on the defense side. So, obviously someone getting paid by the state is going to say, yeah, it was written by you're prosecuting who? Sarah Pender? Yeah, it was written by Sarah Pender. That's it. So, at any rate, that's where that went. But she was hung on that. That letter hung her.
Well, the thing is, the other part of this as well is Rick Hall muddies the waters as well. Please go back to what Rick Hall does as well, because I found it interesting that he submits to a polygraph and passes. So what's his official story, at least in the beginning, because this is a crazy story and his involvement right to the very end. But what does he say? What does he contend from the beginning, and then the polygraph, and then the trial itself?
Rick Hall agreed to take a polygraph, and he said, and the prosecution, signed off on it, and they said, yeah, okay, we'll do it, and what happened was Rick took it, and he passed it. And they asked him the questions. They said, "Do you know for a fact who shot these two?" And he said, "Yes." Were you present when they were shot? No. On the night of this incident, did you shoot her, the girlfriend? No. Did you shoot him? No. And the conclusion of the polygraph examiner for the police department, it said that he told the truth during this polygraph, and he later said, I passed it by putting a tack in my shoe. And when I did that, it would, I would press on it when I was asked the question, and I could tell a lie and pass it.
Wow.
Because he would, remember, Rick Hall vacillated. He would say, "Yeah, she did it." "Oh wait, no, I did it." That kind of thing. And so, he was going back and forth. But he was given 3 separate polygraphs, and he passed them.
Wow. And he said that he had an extensive, he does have an extensive criminal record, and he said that was a disadvantage to him right away, and he knew that was the impression by police that Sarah Pender was this hardworking, educated person, and he was this ne'er-do-well drug dealer. So
they're never going to believe him. That's what he thought. He thought they're never going to believe him. But this is kind of curious though. The polygraph, of course, is not admitted in court, so nobody ever really knew about this.
Right. Interesting.
So, yeah, I mean, so no. The one thing we do know though, no matter what, Sarah was there. She helped dispose of the bodies, and she did not turn anybody in. You can't really go back and after they catch you say, "Oh, by the way, he did it." And it's not the way the law works. She could have. I mean, she went to work. She could have easily called the police and turned everybody in.
Yeah.
But so she's guilty of murder in the eyes of the law. But at any rate, that was that's where we got off on the And when I came into the again as I reported this book, I just kept on coming across things that I just couldn't imagine. I couldn't believe I was finding. I would go one place and I'd find something, and then I'd listen to these tapes, and then they'd mention a name, and I'd call that person, and then I'd get more information. And it was a wonderful reporting excursion, I got to say.
It's interesting because I believe right to the very end of your book that of the events are that he must have shot Drew. And I don't know if I believed her motivation or her motive for the killing, and in her eyes, but I really did believe that she was not present, that she did not manipulate Rick into shooting them or order him or command him to shoot these people, that something went awry. That's what my belief is almost to the end of the book. So again, you did a masterful job of leaving that some suspense where usually in true crime everything's almost a foregone conclusion. So now let's continue here. Let's continue here because the story is just beginning to have some twists and turns, to say the least. Now we have Sarah Pender, and where does she go to be incarcerated? What institution is she placed in?
Well, after she's convicted, she's sent to Rockville. And it's a woman's prison, about a ways out in the country, away from Indianapolis, and so she went up there. It was just this is it. You're in there for 110 years, and she was terribly frightened to go out there for some reason. She was in there with the general population. She believed she was going to have a big presence. She wanted some security. Given her sentence, it was a big sentence. She was just going to be, she feared that she would have tough girls, bent on making a name for themselves and on taking her out. She wrote to the judge, in fact, I'm pleading with you to help me because I'm afraid I have 110 years and high-profile murder, and I'm going to a huge prison. Blah blah blah.
And they sent her to the huge prison.
Yeah, they sent her. Right. Yeah. They sent her to Rockville, and there she was. Really, it was. Rockville wasn't a terrible place. It was. It was prison, but in terms of incarceration, it wasn't the worst.
Now she exhausted her appeals in a couple of years, I guess 2 or 3 years, and then after that, what's her behavior like, and what's her demeanor like in prison? By all accounts, from the research that you've done, what is she up to? What kind of inmate is she? Is she depressed? Is she despondent? Is she angry? Tell us what Sarah Pender is like behind bars.
Oh no, she was a very good inmate. She worked with they had an adopt a pet program. They had these kinds of things. She was they try to say model inmate, but she really had very few beefs. She completed a bachelor's degree, and so she got along. Essentially she got along, and and to talk to some of the inmates loved her, and then essentially she was a very, very good inmate. She got a lot done. Funny, I talk about this in the book. I came across a lot of her. She was doing essays, really nice essays and things like that. I mean, she was really smart, and she was showing off her brain in there. And she was the queen bee, essentially, for 8 years. While she was, really, she was there. She was sent there in the fall of 2001. So, for the better part of 8 years, for the better part of 7 years. While she was there.
Did she have?
She was a very good inmate.
Did she have family visiting her during that time? Was her family supportive while she was in prison?
She had a lot of visitors. She had family, non-family, all kinds of friends. She had she had all kinds of people. She had people, all her family. I mean, her from both sides. As I said, it was a broken home. So, but she had people from both sides of her family visiting her, and she was she was, I guess she had a lot of support, a lot of wonderful letters from her father, who truly, truly loved her. And again, in the book, I recount some of these letters that she was getting from him, and so on. So, yeah, a lot of support in that prison from her family. But remember, they're presuming she's in it for the long haul. She's in it for life.
Sure. Now, through your research, you find that Sarah Pender is speaking with, again, she's outgoing and gregarious, and she's charming people, women, men, guards, anyone that she can in this prison. But she's also talking to some inmates that she can trust in this institution. And later, through your research, you find this out. But what is she talking about with these inmates much earlier than the 8 years when she does finally escape? What is she talking about with these inmates? Conflict.
She's always saying she always felt she could walk out. Always. Because remember, she's she always thought she was smarter than everybody. And so she'd always, and I think in a lot of prisons it's a very common subject, is I'm going to get out of here. I'm somehow going to be able to get out, escape. It's on everyone's mind, I think. And in Sarah's case, she was, Sarah had always thought she was smarter than everyone else, and so that was in her plan all along. I think was somehow she was going to be able to get out of there. What she didn't know, of course, is that they knew they had guards in there that were what we would call dirty, but that goes on in this book, and if you're ready to move on to that, we can.
Yeah, the thing is, what I found interesting was that the idea that one of the most prized possessions in prison would be a cell phone for obvious reasons. And
sure.
There were many inmates with cell phones, so it was routine to have security lax enough that at least they had these cell phones to be able to communicate. But you also said that it wasn't so uncommon for drugs to be brought into institutions. Again, how do drugs get into institutions? The easiest way would probably be walking right through the doors via a guard. Now, tell us about one guard in particular that becomes a real star in this story, Scott Spittler. Tell us about him.
Yeah. Well, Scott Spittler was indeed a guard there, and she was he had a hard luck life. He wasn't he wasn't really he wasn't the most fortunate guy in the world, and so he hadn't been there real long. And but he would like a lot of these guards, the male guards, would have sex with the inmates, and so he Sarah was one of them. And as one inmate told me, once you've got a guard, once he's having sex with an inmate, you own that guard, because they'll squeal, and then they'll do anything to prove it, and they will prove it, and the guy's gone.
Right.
So Scott Spittler began associating. And in fact, in the probable cause, affidavit, they knew this. They knew before Sarah even escaped that he was associating with her, and in fact that he was suspected of trafficking drugs and unprofessional conduct with offenders. And that was in a probable cause affidavit filed with the court by the state before when they were convicting Spittler after Sarah escaped. But at any rate, he was bringing in Benadryl and other drugs. In fact, his wife, Scott Spittler's wife, had been in a car wreck, and he was bringing in some of her painkillers for Sarah to sell inside, and she was doing that. She was selling them. She was getting them inside and outside. She was working all kinds of angles and selling these drugs. And so essentially here we go. Spittler's on the hook for it, and she owns him. And now she says, "Hey, look, I want to get out of here. Can you help me?" He said, "Yeah, I could do that."
That takes an incredible. When you talk about the manipulation, because we talked about this, she's the female Charles Manson. Well, that could be a fair amount of exaggeration there to lump her in in the same category. But the evidence of this manipulation is pretty strong when you can get this Spittler guy. I don't care what kind of character he's had, or he's had a hard luck life. Number one, she's having sex with him. So and we see this later on in her relationship when she's on the run, that she must be, a pretty good sex mate, and be able to indulge these people in areas that they haven't been indulged in beforehand, we'll say. But this Scott Spittler, to be able to talk this guy into throwing his entire career away to get her out of the prison is some really good evidence of her manipulative nature.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's one thing to, she could have asked him a lot of different things. There's a point where somebody's going to draw the line.
Sure.
But this guy didn't draw the line at all on that. He said, "Sure, I'll get you." He got some civilian clothes, and so on, and he told her, where. He told her, essentially the layout of the outside of that prison, so she could walk out undetected. And and he agreed to have the van waiting for her. He had a van waiting for her that she crawled into after she walked out of the common areas, and and he hid her. Helped her get through the security and into the open parking lot, through the gates of the prison and into the parking lot.
And what was he supposed to get from this? What did she promise him, if anything, for his role in this?
$15,000.
Was he in love with her? Was there some promise of them being together, or was it just straight $15,000?
Straight $15,000. Now this is, and this is, there was not hope for another relationship or anything like that. She got out, and she was driving back to Indianapolis with her friend, and actually when she got out, he called her, and he said, he called her, and he said, in the book we talk about, he said, "I'm out of work. I want to see where you are." And she says, she said, "I'm near Indianapolis," and he said, "Everything's cool. Give me 6 weeks and get everything settled, and I'll start sending your money." And Spittler says, "You better, because if you don't, I will track down every person you know and love, and I will hurt you and I will hurt them." That was that. That's where Spittler was at.
Right. Sounds serious. Now, she had assembled a network and arranged a network of people that could help her when she did go on the run. So tell us a little bit about some of those contacts and what she did immediately and what those contacts did for her immediately after.
Well, it was interesting because she had waiting for her in the parking lot of the prison when Spittler drove her out, and waiting was a friend she had made. She had just met her briefly at Marion County Jail. Her name was Jamie Long. But they'd maintained a friendship over the years, writing letters and so on and so forth, and visiting. Jamie Long was not a felon at that point, and so she could visit her in prison and so on. And So that was the plan was Jamie Long was simply going to drive her to freedom and turned her loose in Indianapolis. And so she had first they had a house where she could she could stay and just kind of get it together there. And then I guess immediately after they found out it was Spiller rolled immediately on Jamie Long, who drove her out, and the cops descended on Jamie right away, and Sarah, boom, split immediately, and they had already set her up with someone else, essentially another inmate that she knew and that Sarah knew in Rockville, who had gotten out. She was serving a term for forgery convictions. So she had this network, this little network of people, of inmates mostly, and their kin. So she knew all these folks, and so she went over from one house to the next, and then they gave her some money so she could stay at a little hotel, and so on. And there was pressure right away. And in this book, we talk about one officer in particular, one guy who just kept the pressure on her relentlessly. And so essentially, she got out. She went through a network of former inmates, and she finally ended up with a friend who was turning tricks down at a local strip joint, and had a client guy, was a wealthy entrepreneur, and said, this guy is kind of like looking for wild things, and he wants to have a threesome, a tryst with a couple other girls, and do you want to do that? Because wow, you can earn $100. And Sarah said, sure, $100, that's great. And so they had this tryst at a little hotel, a really crappy hotel. And next thing you know, this guy's like, this Sarah, this chick's really cool. He really liked Sarah. Took a fancy to her. And she was using a different name, Ashley. But not that this guy was really had his eye on the news, like who's an escaped con. And that was that. They essentially were together, and he even talked on tape about somewhat being, having real feelings for Sarah at this point, almost immediately.
Right away, he gives her gainful employment too, because he recognized that she's got some brains, and so he has a business, GC3, a trucking company anyway.
Mm-hmm. Trucking company,
right away he puts her to work. So he's not just taking care of her. They have a relationship.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And he's this guy's semi-retired. He didn't know. He had plenty of time, and he still had his companies, and he got her work almost immediately. And so it was, before all that happened, remember, she is on America's Most Wanted. Her face is plastered everywhere. They're in Indiana, and yet they're going to casinos. They're eating at restaurants. They're going to Walmart. She's right out there, but nobody seemed to ever pick up on that. But he provided her a job. He knew a guy who had a work site down by Cincinnati, hauled her down there, and she started working, in exchange for a room at this project, and that was that.
Now, this person we're talking about is Tom Welsh, and he's a married guy, but admittedly, he says, look, I have a real weakness. I've got a sexual addiction. I had a near-death experience with this illness, and I was retired a little bit early, and my wife travels, and I'm bored, and I like going on the wild side, like you say. And so, so Sarah dyes her hair red, cuts it, and like you say, they're out dating and having a good time, and she's his mistress, and she's working in the day and earning some money, but she's living like a normal person, and they have a normal relationship to a certain extent.
Oh yeah, they're eating at Bob Evans. I mean, again, what was striking me as I found this stuff out, as I wrote the book itself, I was like, this woman is on America's Most Wanted, and of course eventually she was caught, but it's just nobody's seeing her. Her disguise wasn't all that great,
Mm-hmm. Now, the thing is, on September 13, 2008, like you say, the first broadcast of the program concerning Sarah Pender is aired, but there are, because she provided such humiliation for the correctional service that one of their own correctional officers assisted her in her escape, and that she was still on the lam, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and Larry Sells and this Harmon guy, this detective, it's driving this guy nuts. He's taking it personal, and he's on this person hunt here, this manhunt for Sarah Pender, and it's frustrating him. He's doing this 24/7. He's living and breathing and eating this, and he's still not able to find this person. And so America's Most Wanted airs it up to 5 times before it nets some results. So in that period of time, all this is going on, but she's just working normally, and like you say, they're just out there dating, and but she's rising up in terms of becoming the most wanted female fugitive in America by the time, well before she's even caught.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it just keeps on. It just seems that it keeps moving forward, and she, and Ryan Harmon, the agent who's really on her tail, is pressing at every turn, and he's close. And he's contacting people that she had contacted because he can track cell phone calls, and so he's just a step behind her, and he knows, essentially that she hadn't left the area. Now he was thinking, she might go to Florida where her birth mom was living at the time, or she might go to Seattle, Washington area where her father was, Roland, but at that point he knew. That because of tracking these phones, he knew she was in the area. He kept getting hits, and so on. So and so that was that's what he was doing. And they did these America's Most Wanted. They even went over there and got Rick Hall on camera to talk about about Sarah.
Now, what did Ryan Harmon? It's very important, this Rick Hall, to this story, especially now, as Ryan Harmon contacts him. Now, what does Rick Hall say, and why is he cooperating with police? What's the premise that he's cooperating with police, and why does Ryan Harmon believe that this Rick Hall can be any kind of asset to him at all?
Well, he believed that she would quite possibly get in touch with him. He wanted to, he wanted, but he also thought that Hall could provide insight into Sarah's habits. So he went in there and he kind of just, he talked to him, and he said, he just wanted to know, he had nothing, he had nothing to gain by helping. Unless he was afraid that Sarah could get hurt, and he kind of made that case. He said, so he kind of asked Rick, if really essentially is Hall was no snitch, but he did say that if Sarah contacted him, could you help? And he gave no promises. He would not help a cop take someone in, but he just promised to be vigilant.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't there? Sorry, wasn't there one little aspect of it too, that he was almost afraid that if she stayed on the lam, she would not ever contact him again? Was it? Didn't I read something like that, to that extent?
There was something. I don't know that he carried that on too much, but he did say, maybe she'll never contact me, and maybe if she does, maybe if she, gets caught, maybe then she'll write me a letter, something like that.
Yeah.
When he did, but when he did that interview for America's Most Wanted, that appearance, the raw footage is very, very interesting. And in the interview with America's Most Wanted, he minimized Sarah's role in the murder. He said, "I did it." Mm-hmm. It was an hour of tape boiled down to 2 minutes that made it to broadcast. And in the portion that didn't air, which I talk about in the book, Hull denied that he was manipulated in any way by Sarah during their relationship, and particularly, with regard to the murder.
Wow. Again, a little bit more evidence of that manipulation.
That's right, yes. Yeah.
Incredible. Now, at one point, Tom Welsh and Sarah Pender actually are aware of the America's Most Wanted. I guess maybe on the broadcast. What was that like? What was that experience like for Tom Welsh? What was his reaction as a result?
Well, he'd already known. He knew that she was an escaped murderer. But he was really. He really didn't have. He really just kind of. She said. She told him. She said. He had known this, right? So they're watching it, and they're in a hotel room, and it was just to him it was. He said it was just a word, fugitive. He said I was hooked after the first day, and so and then it was Sarah said that she wasn't there. Rick killed him. They were in a drug partnership. I came to the house. He'd killed him. Told me to get rid of him, or he's going to kill me. And she was 20 and stupid. And that was it. And he said, I trusted her because everything I would see and hear, that wasn't the person I knew.
Right. But he was, what I thought was interesting, the way you captured it in the book, was that he, at that point, said, wait a minute, what am I into here? Because the magnitude of the rebroadcast, I mean, all over America, people are looking for his girlfriend. Again, like you say, not that cleverly disguised. And for one moment, despite the drugs and despite the revelry, he said, well, hey, what am I doing here? It wasn't enough for him to call police. Maybe he was too far in, but he certainly, at least in the book, you say that he thought, wow, well, what have I got myself into here?
Right, that's right. Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, though, I mean, I was very struck by the idea that he didn't, he wasn't about to give it up, and so
now, what was the circumstances that finally Sarah Pender was captured? Give us what happened in the sequence of events.
Well, Sarah had moved up to Chicago, or been moved up to Chicago, where she got a job again at a construction firm doing accounting. And the story that and this is also through Tom Welsh's contacts. And she said that she was on the lam from her crazy ex-husband, and so she was, there she was working there, and taking the bus to work, and that was that. And so on a Saturday night, on the Saturday before Christmas, December 20th, another episode of, there was kind of a rehash episode of America's Most Wanted, and it went on, and they said, here we said, I can't figure out, we haven't caught this woman yet, but the U.S. Marshals are at our hotline tonight, and they're ready to roll on your tips. And sure enough, a call came in around 10, and it didn't come in to America's Most Wanted. It came into the headquarters at North Clark Street in Chicago. And a tipster advised that a woman who was profiled in America's Most Wanted a few minutes ago was living in Rogers Park, and her name was Ashley Thompson. It was a male caller. The call went out to a couple of the cops on duty, and they were just wrapping up a traffic stop. They were about 2 miles away from the apartment building, and they saw, most of the time these are just locals, a girlfriend ratting out her estranged boyfriend or something like that. And the cops had no idea, so they went over there, and they went over to the apartment, and rang the bell, and they got in, and they said she came to the door, And they asked, do you have any ID? She said, no, I don't. She said, I have a copy of my cable bill. And then the cop says, well, really, who are you? And they looked, stood there. They were complete silence. And all of a sudden she just said, okay, you guys finally got me. And one of the officers said, we got you for what? They didn't even really know. And they didn't even have their guns drawn. That's how little they knew about her. Yeah. And that was that. It was all over. And the guy whoever called, there's a $25,000 reward. Whoever called never collected that reward.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it maybe because of that fact itself, I thought maybe it was someone close to her that figured out maybe the scam of it, or had seen obviously had seen America's Most Wanted, but maybe somebody close. But regardless, again, Christmas time, nobody collected their $25,000. So. Yeah,
which is kind of interesting. It was somebody with money, obviously. But,
now, one of the most interesting aspects, and I've alluded to it about the suspense and the surprise of this book, is that this Ryan Harmon, the diligent cop that was consumed by this case, gets to again question Rick Hall. Talks to Sarah Pender, but again he talks to Rick Hall. What does Rick Hall say in the end as to who did what, when, and how?
Well, that's at the end of the book, and Sarah's been caught, and everything's done, and really what Ryan Harmon's doing, and I kind of walk the reader through this, is he's got to wrap it all up, and he says, I've got to know everything, and he said, he has to sit down, he wants to go talk to Rick Hall, and so he went out and he picked up a foot-long meatball sub at Subway, and he said, so. He says he comes in there and he sits down with Hall, and he says, Harmon says to Hall, tell me something that no one knows. And Harmon already knew the results of that polygraph, and so he said it was all Sarah. Sarah did it. I went to the liquor store to get a case of Budweiser and a fifth of Old Granddad, and he came back, and Sarah was sitting on the couch, cradling the gun, crying, and the house smelled like gunpowder, and the bodies were there.
Now, how compelling was what I found interesting was that Harmon didn't just take it at face value. He let Hall talk, and Hall said, well, if I wanted to do it, and what was his rationale to dismiss the idea that he would have done it? What did he say?
If he was going to do it, he said he would have used a 9mm rather than a 12 gauge. And he also pointed something else out. Inside a new shotgun comes a plastic cap inside the barrel that blocks out dust and dirt.
Right.
They found that cap in the body of Andrew Cataldi. Right. Now, the thing is, he never, the cap would never have been taken out. If a user would have taken that, a savvy person would have taken that cap out.
That's right.
He didn't, and that was that. And
he made a good point too. He made a good point too. He said, "Listen, I wouldn't have done the murders in my own house with a shotgun with deer slugs."
Yes.
That were created such a mess that nobody could have cleaned it up.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
and
that's exactly right. I mean, he would not have shot somebody at close range like that, and I let the reader decide. And I think it has to be the journalist in me, and that you don't draw a conclusion. Let the reader draw the conclusions, and I'm just going to set them out there, the facts out there, and they can, and the reader can, figure that one out. I don't know. Where did you come down? Did you feel this case was pretty compelling?
Well, I found it fascinating, and really I would have got sucked into, even though I'm a hard-boiled kind of guy, just looking at it at face value, I would have believed her version of events. Even though I could see that she was, you have to have a certain amount of psychopathic bent to be able to help clean up a crime and then, like you say, go to work like nothing happened.
Yes.
So, and by American law, I know that, if you went there, you helped out, you're just as guilty anyway, so who cares who did what first? It wouldn't make that much difference. But I would have thought that he would have done it and she would have just helped out. I wouldn't have believed that she was in fear for her life or anything like that. But I was very, very surprised by Rick Hull's admission later, and just the way he explained it, I would have believed that version of events. That makes the most amount of sense, especially when you see the trail of manipulation. She was fantastic at getting things done, making friends quickly, them believing any story that she did give, because she basically just dug down deep into the character that she was before all of this happened, and she could always maintain that. And because she was smart and because she was charming, people believed anything. And so rightfully, when somebody said she was very much like Charles Manson in terms of manipulation, there was a lot of evidence that she manipulated a lot of people. And if it wasn't just for America's Most Wanted, and a fluke at that, she'd still be sitting out there somewhere. No doubt.
It's quite true. It's quite true. She was someone who could have folded into normal life, I believe.
Sure.
Because she presented very, very well. I met her twice. I interviewed her twice at prison, and she presented very, very nice. And I think she could. It's no wonder that she had jobs and could pull off the scam that she was on the lam from an enraged ex-husband, and so on and so forth. It's just she would be one of those people you'd find, living in the suburbs after, in 30 years later.
Yeah, it's an amazing story because, it's very unique as well. A lot of true crime books, there's similarities to a lot of stories, but this one has an incredible twists and turns in this, and especially with the exclusive information you did get on what she was doing when she was on the lam, provides this incredible access to a story that we normally don't get in true crime at all. What did the fugitive do? Fugitives normally aren't on the lam for very long, or we don't know much about them unless it comes right from the person themselves. And this is a fascinating tale, and you get the reader right inside this journey here. I'm looking for Sarah Pender, as everyone else in America was. So, incredible story, terrific. And good work, Steve.
Thanks. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a great interview, and thank you very much for coming on to our program here this evening. I just wanted people to know that we're listening. The book that we profiled this evening is called Girl Wanted, The Chase for Sarah Pender, as seen on America's Most Wanted, by Steve Miller, who's a co-author of A Slaying in the Suburbs. So I want to thank you very much again, Steve, and you have yourself a good evening.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Steve. Good night.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the program True Murder, the most shocking killers in true crime history, and the authors have written about them. Good night.